Okay, it was an exciting weekend in sports, including the Knicks rumors about firing Dave Fizdale, LSU at Alabama, what that means for the college football playoffs, and then who is the NFL MVP? Is it Russell Wilson? Is it Deshaun Watson? So as always, we start with the ancillary news around the sports world. The MLB Awards are being handed out throughout the week. So far, the rookies of the year have been announced. Pete Alonso, the first baseman for the Mets, has been announced as the NL Rookie of the Year, receiving 29 out of 30 first-place votes. He also won the Home Run Derby this year. Yordan Alvarez, the first baseman for the Astros, was voted the American League Rookie of the Year, the first in Astros history to be unanimously voted Rookie of the Year. Switching sports over to NCAA Football, Chase Young, the stud defensive end for Ohio State, has violated the NCAA rules and is being currently suspended for 4 games. 3 remaining. He was suspended for the Maryland game after he posted on Twitter kind of explaining his situation from a broad perspective. We've learned more since, and I actually wrote a personal take about it. It is up on the website, so go check that out if you want to learn some more. Moving on, Tony Parker was honored with a jersey retirement, concluding the big 3 that was in San Antonio. Tim Duncan, Manu, and Tony Parker now live as legends in the rafters in San Antonio. Dak Prescott's warm-up routine in Sunday Night Football has now taken the internet by storm and has gone completely viral, with other NFL players mimicking him and songs being put in the background, and it's a really great thing. If you haven't seen it, it's everywhere, so just check it out. So I'd like to start off this 3 things with the major sports story coming out, and it is the New York Knicks. Yes, the New York Knicks are yet again in the news, and for yet again not good reasons. Dave Fizdale is apparently under fire and looking to actually be fired very soon from President Steve Mills. Quote, he has been laying the groundwork for quite some time right now, or for quite some time. And Steve Mills has not been a great owner, or great president, I should say, to say the least. A lot of people, I say Steve Mills, and they say, who's Steve Mills? When you think of the New York Knicks, you think of the past 5 coaches that have been there, including Dave Fizdale. You think of James Dolan. You think of R.J. Barrett. You think of whoever else you want to think of on the court, or James Dolan most of the time in the news for doing something ridiculous. But Steve Mills has been there for quite some time now and has overseen the team both as general manager and team president, and they have sucked for a long time. They actually haven't made it deep in the playoffs, let alone won the championship in decades. The last time they won a championship was 1973, I believe. Last time they actually made it deep in the playoffs was in the 90s. They haven't made the playoffs for 6 straight years. And their numbers for this year read as followed. Their points per game differential, they're 29th in the league. Offensive efficiency, they're last. Field goal percentage, dead last. And then assists per game, they're 28. Now, this is a lot of reasons for this. First of all, the team they assembled is just garbage. They're terrible. To couple that with another issue is their injuries. They have injuries all over the board, including Elfrid Payton, Dennis Smith Jr., Reggie Bullock, and Mitchell Robinson. Now, Reggie Bullock may not be in this conversation because he might be a second or third stringer, but Elfrid Payton and Dennis Smith Jr. were 2 targets not only last season, with Dennis Smith Jr. being in a trade for Kristaps, but Elfrid Payton was an offseason acquisition. Now that they didn't get Kevin Durant, Kyrie, Kawhi, any of the other major free agents, that was one of their offseason acquisitions, and now he's injured. Mitchell Robinson, being one of their young stars, playing at center, is injured. So you now have on the court Frank Ntilikina, R.J. Barrett, Marcus Morris Sr., Julius Randle, Bobby Portis, and then you have Kevin Knox and Taj Gibson mixed in there. That's not a squad that's going to do better than 2-8, which they are 2-8. Now, should you fire Dave Fizdale because of this? No. Marcus Morris Sr. is their top scorer with 18 points per game. Marcus Morris Sr., they're awful. And yet they're using Dave Fizdale as another scapegoat to say, oh, we're really. They said this in the post game interview the other day when they lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers, got blown out by the Cavaliers. They said the classic BS that we always hear from presidents or GMs or owners is, we expect more. The product we put on the court, we expect them to win, or they're not giving their full effort, or this or that. And it's like you look at them and you go, have you watched your team play? Have you seen who's carrying up the ball? Who scores? Nobody's over 20 points per game. We're in a dynamic duo era, and there is no duo, let alone any sort of dynamic in New York at all. And they're firing Dave Fizdale, or they're in the works of firing Dave Fizdale. It doesn't make any sense. You're not going to fix anything by it. You're gonna patch a hole when the whole dam is breaking. Steve Mills has been there for 15 years, and they've made the playoffs 6 times. They've only won 3 rounds out of those 6 times since 2000. That's more than Steve Mills. Since Steve Mills is there, if he had been 15 years, 2004 he had come in. They were in the playoffs in 2004. They didn't win a round. The next time it was 2011, 2012. They didn't win any rounds there. And then 2013, they won 1 round. So in the 15-year tenure he's been there, they've only won 1 round in the playoffs. And yet you keep firing coaches and drafting young stars, and nothing changes. So we're going to take a breath and switch sports, move over to an actually good team, actually 2 good teams in LSU and Alabama who faced off this past weekend in Tuscaloosa. It was a great game. LSU came out on top, and let me tell you what, my takeaways from the game include LSU is a monster, and they beat Alabama, which is a big milestone. Now, I'd like to run over a couple numbers with you. So Joe Burrow, 31 of 39, 393 yards, 3 touchdowns. Their small running back, which was a big scene after the game. Clyde Edwards, 20 carries, 103 yards, 3 touchdowns, 9 receptions, 77 yards, 1 touchdown. 4 touchdowns total, almost 200 yards total, both in the air and on the ground. Played like a stud. Ran like he was 6'5" and 400 pounds. He's not very big. Meanwhile, on the other side, Najee Harris caught fire in the second half and did amazing. Tua was, you could see, a little injured, but after the first half, he really started getting his groove back. They actually held LSU scoreless in the third, so it was interesting to see kind of Alabama move back into a position that Alabama's used to being, which is the dominant position, the alpha position, really kind of dictating the game. But LSU wouldn't have it. Although they were scoreless in the third, they still held on and won in the fourth. And it was a great game, really a classic. Now LSU has to go to Ole Miss. They have Arkansas, and then they have Texas A&M. They're going to win out. Alabama, after losing this game, we're going to see the college football rankings come out tonight, but it's going to be interesting to see if they can kind of carve a path for themselves to make it into the playoffs. They are not in control of their own destiny. Now, if they beat Auburn, which Auburn is still ranked, if they beat Auburn, it could help. It would definitely help them, but they were going to need somebody to lose. The issue is it's not going to be LSU. Ohio State, if they lose to Michigan or Penn State, which is a very big possibility without Chase Young, then we could see Alabama make the playoffs. Now, I've taken a couple teams, mainly the top teams that I believe are really competing for that 1 through 4 slot in the playoffs. Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Clemson. And the NCAA has their total defense and total offensive rankings. So I want to run over a couple of those. So Ohio State, starting with them, they're number 1 in total defense. LSU's number 33 in total defense. Alabama's number 30. And Clemson is number 4. So think about that. The 2 SEC teams out of these 4 teams are in the 30s, while Clemson at number 4 and Ohio State at number 1. Total defense. Now, total offense. Ohio State is number 5. So they're number 1 in total defense, number 5 in total offense. Very, very strong. LSU's number 4 in total offense. Not a surprise. They're an offensive juggernaut. Joe Burrow and those boys, I've already explained how they really just they went into Tuscaloosa and they whooped up on Alabama. Made it look like they had no defense. Alabama's number 8. So 4 slots behind LSU, but 3 slots ahead of them in total defense. So comparable, to say the least. Now, LSU looks better because they beat Alabama, and LSU all season has looked better. But Clemson's number 2. So you got number 4 in total defense for Clemson and number 2 in total offense for Clemson. Now the ACC and the Big Ten are 2 weaker conferences in comparison to the SEC. But that doesn't take anything away from the fact that they are so far ahead of the top 2 SEC teams, that it really gives you reason to believe that those 2 teams are the ones you got to watch out for. So just a quick little fact for you before we move on to the third thing, that Alabama had 31 straight home wins in Tuscaloosa until this game. Their last loss was in 2015 to Ole Miss. So think about that. LSU went into Tuscaloosa while Alabama has a 31-game winning streak in their home stadium, and they beat them in their home stadium. I'll leave that up for interpretation. I again have said Ohio State is a monster. I really think Ohio State might be the favorites this year. Clemson's in there. LSU's obviously in there. We'll see if Alabama's in there. Rankings come out tonight. So moving on, we're going to talk about the NFL MVP. Now, we saw Russell Wilson and the Seahawks take on Jimmy and the 49ers on Monday Night Football. It was really a great game. I tweeted out halfway through it. I don't think we've had a better Monday Night Football game this year. Russell Wilson wins. They go into San Francisco and beat Jimmy and the undefeated 49ers. Now, what does that say about the Seahawks? What does that say about Russ and the MVP odds? Well, I've got a couple different names to throw into the conversation, including Lamar Jackson, including Deshaun Watson, and Christian McCaffrey. Now, Christian McCaffrey is kind of at a disadvantage because there's only been 3 running backs since 2000 to win the NFL MVP, the last being Adrian Peterson in 2012. So Russell Wilson is the favorite. The 8-2 Seahawks clearly help his case, but his numbers are staggering. 2,700 yards through the air, 23 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Great ratio, great yardage. Also 256 yards on the ground, 3 rushing touchdowns. Amazing numbers. MVP type numbers. Let's put that in perspective. Patrick Mahomes has 2,600 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And he's missed a few games. Now, I'm not making a case for Patrick Mahomes, although he is back and he very well could catch up. But it just kind of gives you a perspective on actually how good Patrick Mahomes is. 18-1, 2,600 yards for Patrick Mahomes. Now to move on, Russell Wilson, like I said, is a favorite for the 8-2 Seahawks, but tied for second is Lamar and Deshaun Watson. Lamar currently sits at a little over 2,000 yards, 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, but he also has 700 yards on the ground and 6 rushing touchdowns. Lamar has played out of his mind. And what's amazing is the top 2 in this MVP race so far, the prediction, are 2 quarterbacks that are not prototypical or perfect size quarterbacks. Undersized quarterbacks, as we say, or too small. They run too much. They'll get hurt. I mean, Lamar Jackson on his run this past weekend, and on a lot of his longer runs, you watch him just pass people. He's just faster than everybody else. It's like Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill has just got this speed that's just unbelievable to watch. So he's tied for second with the 7-2 Ravens with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson, 6-3 Texans. And I say the records because the records are important. Unfortunately, I believe it's unfortunate. However, if you are the quarterback, you are the captain of the offense and really the captain of the team. And so the record does reflect on your leadership and your skill in the game. So the 6-3 Texans with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun has had an amazing year. 2,400 yards, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 279 yards on the ground, and 5 touchdowns. But you look at that. So 256 yards on the ground for Russell Wilson, 279 on the ground for Deshaun Watson. Lamar Jackson is 702 yards on the ground. He has more than both of them combined on the ground. He's playing out of his mind. And he has a 7-2 record. The Baltimore Ravens are indefensible, as Dan Orlovsky said on Get Up. The offense is indefensible. That might be a stretch. That might just be a hot take. But if you've got a quarterback that has 702 yards, Christian McCaffrey has about 950 yards this season. Christian McCaffrey, 950 yards. Lamar Jackson, 700 yards as a quarterback. Christian McCaffrey is most definitely the top back in the league. Now, I personally love Christian McCaffrey. For a long time, I was holding out believing that he would be the NFL MVP. It's just not going to happen. He may be the only thing in the Panthers offense that is holding them together as Kyle Allen continues to make great strides in his early career, but Christian McCaffrey is really just amazing. He can do anything. Unfortunately, Russell Wilson and his 8-2 Seahawks, after beating the undefeated 49ers on Monday Night Football in San Francisco, he's clearly the favorite, and I clearly have to go with him. So that's all I have for you guys. We went over a lot of the ancillary news, including the MLB Awards, which will be going on throughout the rest of the week. My next video will definitely have the rest of who had won the awards. We talked about Chase Young and his pending suspension. Ohio State will be battling that suspension. Check out the article on the website. Tony Parker and the jersey retirement. Dak and his new hip dance, or whatever you want to call it, warm-up. Gordon Hayward's broken hand. And then in the things that we talked about the Knicks and the looming firing of Dave Fizdale, and how Steve Mills is really just patching a hole in a dam that's about to break. We talked about LSU and Alabama, as well as Ohio State and Clemson, and kind of the state of college football. And then we finished up with Russell Wilson's great win over the undefeated San Francisco 49ers on Monday Night Football, and kind of his position in the NFL MVP race, along with Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, and Christian McCaffrey. So again, if you have any questions, please post them in the comments or reach out to me on Twitter. Until then, I will see you next time.